While Gardaí are getting beaten to a pulp on camera in Ballyfermot, Helen McEntee is telling news outlets how she'd love to remain Justice Minister. But the question is, would anyone else love it? This is Scallan and you're watching Gript Media. Before we start the video, if you want to support Gript and our work, make sure to take 2 seconds right now to like, comment and subscribe. Even if you have absolutely nothing to say, just comment if you think that Helen McEntee has done a good job as Justice Minister. Because by liking, commenting and sharing, this channel will get boosted in the algorithm and then get seen by more people. So if you want to see this channel grow, just take 2 seconds right now to like, comment and do your part to support independent journalism in Ireland. And so with that said, on to the video. The word reshuffle is actually a very fitting name for what's set to happen to the Irish government cabinet in a month or so, because like shuffling a deck, you end up with the exact same cards you started with before, just in a slightly different order. For example, Finance Minister Paschal Donoghue is set to swap roles with Public Expenditure Minister Michael McGrath. And the only thing that's really different about these two individuals is that one of them is from Fine Gael and the other one is from Fianna Fáil. Other than that, ideologically, they are identical twins. There will be no noticeable difference in how Ireland runs its finances after this swap. We'll have the same scheduled carbon tax hike next year, which both men have affirmed. Our corporate tax rate will remain at 15%, which both men support. We'll still be earmarking billions of euros for Ukrainians. Nothing remotely important will change. The only difference is that the pen signing off on these policies will be a Fianna Fáil one and not a Fine Gael one, or vice versa. The government is basically moving these characters around for the sake of moving them at no benefit at all to the voting public whatsoever. It's almost like a game of musical chairs and amounts to a big waste of everyone's time and energy. And so in all the reshuffling, it hardly matters if Justice Minister Helen McEntee stays or goes from her current position, though that won't stop her from trying to hang on to the role for dear life. As reported by the Irish Examiner this week, McEntee keen to retain justice role in cabinet reshuffle. Oh, I bet she is. Justice Minister Helen McEntee has said that she believes she has made it clear that she wants to remain in the justice portfolio after the upcoming cabinet reshuffle. She said, "I think I've probably made it clear that I'd love to stay where I am. There's a lot I'm working on, particularly in the area of domestic violence. I've just published the family court bill on strategy this week. I really want to see that through." Now, at this stage, it's worth pointing out that McEntee has objectively, by her own metric, failed as a minister, and I don't say that to be mean to her personally, but simply to state facts. You're talking about a country where Gardaí are apparently getting beaten to a pulp on camera because criminals have so little respect for law enforcement, as recently seen in Ballyfermot. A female Garda was apparently one of the officers beaten in that incident. The same goes for the Cherry Orchard event, where Garda cars were rammed by joyriding youths who cheered and laughed at the police. So the police in Helen McEntee's Ireland are seen as an absolute joke. And not only that, when I asked Heather Humphreys, who's McEntee's party colleague who will be filling in for her while she's on maternity leave, I asked her about the Cherry Orchard incident and I got a very unsatisfactory answer, to say the least, with her denying that the country is becoming lawless.
You've previously filled in for Justice Minister Helen McEntee, and you may be doing so again in the near future with her second baby. So, Minister, in light of the shocking scenes in Dublin this week of Garda cars being rammed on Cherry Orchard and videos of women having their faces slashed on Dame Street, is it not true that your government is presiding over complete lawlessness?
No, I don't accept that, and I know what we saw in terms of what happened in Cherry Orchard was terrible, but there has been increased resources provided to Garda Síochána, and I know that they will continue to work with the community and to deal with this sort of terrible behaviour.
According to the CSO, in the last year, there's been an increase in rape, sexual assault and sexual offences involving a person with mental impairment. There's also been a jump in assault causing harm, less serious assaults, threats to kill, harassment and no change in attempted murders. Robberies, including burglaries and bank robberies, are up, and there was a huge leap in blackmail and extortion. Drug importation offences are up, shootings are up, fraud is up, kidnapping is up, and all of this is according to the CSO. So in short, under McEntee's tenure, the country has seen a rise of almost every type of serious crime imaginable. I don't see how anyone other than the most partisan, die-hard Fine Gael fan could argue that this paints a picture of a job well done. Granted, in fairness to McEntee, some serious crimes did decrease. For example, murders are down 56%, which sounds great. But a lot of that is actually to do with the fact that the gangland wars between the so-called Kinahan cartel and the Hutch gang appear to have been dialed back in many ways considerably. As of last year, for example, alleged cartel boss Daniel Kinahan has reportedly ordered an end to the killing of rival gang members, which, if true, will have naturally suppressed the national murder rate that year. So in reality, the fact that murders are down seemingly has nothing at all to do with McEntee or her policies or anything like that, and has everything to do with the politics of organised crime. At this point, some people will probably argue that last year we had the lockdown, and they'll argue that as society opened up, there would inevitably be an increase in crime, which isn't necessarily McEntee's fault. But this doesn't wash for a few reasons. First of all, virtually all of the aforementioned crime figures about the rise in shootings and assaults and so on were taken during the lockdown. The CSO stats are from March 2021 to March 2022, but Ireland's lockdown didn't fully end until April the following month. So clearly the surge in crime can't possibly be because of the reopening of society, because society was still closed as these numbers were going up. Moreover, even if it was the case that crime was simply returning to pre-lockdown levels, that would mean that McEntee had not managed to bring the figures down and that they were on course to be at least as bad as when she took office. And this, again, would be a form of failure. If you're hired to solve a problem and the problem still exists years later under your tenure, then that's what most people would call mission failed. But like Pascal Donoghue and Michael McGrath swapping places, it does little good to remove McEntee and replace her with, say, Micheál Martin, who's been proposed as a successor by many in Fianna Fáil. After all, what would Micheál Martin do differently from McEntee in her position? In fact, what would any of them do differently? Let's imagine hypothetically that Micheál Martin became Justice Minister, and let's say he came out guns blazing with all the right policies to tackle crime. Imagine if he said, hey lads, we're going to build more prisons and sack the incompetent judges that constantly let scumbags off with suspended sentences. We're going to forcibly deport violent criminals and put them on planes back to their home countries. We'll have harsher minimum sentencing and better vetting for those that we let into the country. Let's get serious about this. Do you think that that will be tolerated by others if he tried that? Do you think that will be allowed by his government colleagues? That is so radically outside the bounds of anything that these parties have done for decades that no new justice minister would dare to try it even if they wanted to, which, by the way, they don't. Look at the case of Verona Murphy with Fine Gael as a perfect example. Verona Murphy was a Fine Gael candidate for the Dáil in 2019 who correctly argued that the government should be careful when taking in asylum seekers because ISIS extremists might try to pose as those fleeing war to sneak into the country, which is a perfectly reasonable concern rooted in fact. There have indeed been cases of ISIS fighters who pose as refugees to get into Europe. That's a totally real documented phenomenon. But in reaction to this statement, there was a huge blow-up with the Fine Gael top brass, which resulted in a massive row, which ultimately led to Verona Murphy being dumped by the party. Varadkar even said that he regretted choosing her as a candidate. And while that incident relates to Fine Gael, the culture within virtually all of these parties is the same. The fact is, if any TD was actually to break ranks and pursue a different policy that would actually work, they'd be met with huge resistance from the rest of the government, because groupthink is the name of the game within modern Ireland. The rest of the party and the government coalition more broadly would go into spasm if something non-woke was even attempted. So under a hypothetical Justice Minister, Micheál Martin, you would in fact get more of the same. Amnesty schemes for illegal immigrants, so-called hate speech laws that are really just about censorship, changing the Gardaí uniform to look like budget space cadets who are about to blast off, Useless crap, in other words. And the same will be true if it was Pascal Donahue or Catherine Martin or Simon Harris filling the role, because the party culture at root remains the same woke, liberal garbage. Long story short, don't expect a whole lot to change even if she does get turfed out in a month's time. The culture of conformity in government is a far bigger problem than any one incompetent minister. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.